Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to talk about planets and plants, specifically some plant allies that might be useful for you as we're about to go through a long Venus retrograde period in Gemini. And to do that, I have my wife, Ashley, with me today.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so we thought it might be cool to give you guys some herbs that would be useful to work with given some of the big significations of Venus retrograde. First of all, let me put up on the chart the screen so you can see Venus's retrograde and just get a feeling for, what we're dealing with. Okay, so we're going to go through, and what I told my wife in advance that what we were going to do is just kind of put her on the spot and see if she can name herbs off the top of her head that might be fun to work with given the energy of the moment. She has some idea about what is going on already, but I'm going to give her some significations and she's going to go. And this is something we do all the time, actually, where throughout 10 years of being together, we've often we'll just be sitting somewhere and I'll be like, what do you think would be good for this? What kind of herb would be good for that? And I want to show my wife off. She's brilliant and can come up with really cool stuff off the top of her head. That's pretty cool to see. So no pressure. uh, all right. So here's what we're looking at. Here's Venus since in April all the way till August is hanging out in Gemini and is about to turn retrograde in the square to Neptune. A big part of this Venus retrograde transit is the square to Neptune. This is going on, retrograde coming up about the middle of the month till about the end of June. But overall, we're going to talk about Venus in Gemini, Venus square Neptune, and Venus retrograde as three different things that could give us some different herbs to work with as allies. All right, so are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, cool. So first of all, let's talk about the fact that before Venus turns retrograde, that this Venus entire retrograde cycle is really being toned by Venus square Neptune. So let's say that Venus square Neptune, one of the things that it represents is longing. Now, let's say it could be romantic or spiritual or personal or psychological, but Venus square Neptune will fill a person with a sense of being unfulfilled, of longing for something that they can't get. It can be a little weepy in that sense, or a little needy, or it can glamorize things and say like, oh, if only I had this, then I would be happy. So it's that kind of divine sense of discontent, divine heartache, just kind of that divine state of longing and feeling unfulfilled. So pop quiz, which herbs or herb might be good? Maybe we'll just keep it to one if that's easier for you. Which herb comes to mind when you think of people that have that restlessness gene that like, I can't feel satisfied, or I'm longing for something that I don't have? And what's an herb that can help us to feel more satisfied perhaps with what's present, or that can just ease some of that longing and not make it so heart-wrenching?
Yeah, so my mind goes in a few different directions, but I think on the one hand, you could think about herbs that are kind of like a warm blanket that kind of give you like some support and help you to feel cozy and comforted where you are. And the one that popped into my head was pulsatilla. And this is a low dose herb. And for a lot of people, they'll work with it as a homeopathic remedy rather than as an actual plant. But, either of those would work. But pulsatilla is, it's for someone who's sort of like the nervous, dreamy type, and their kind of head is always in the clouds. And one interesting thing about pulsatilla is they're prone to crying. They just sort of out of nowhere will be kind of become wistful and maybe nostalgic, and they'll just sort of start to get really weepy. And so pulsatilla is a specific remedy for that sort of pattern where there's restlessness, nervousness, and that and sort of that tendency towards like nostalgia and crying. The other place my head went was to what would you do to counter that? So on the other side, I was thinking of burdock root as a grounding herb. So if your kind of head is up in the clouds, then if you use something that is a very grounding medicine like burdock, which has this long taproot that really is anchoring and centering, that might also help to give you some footing in the current moment and in your body.
That's cool. Yeah. Here's another one. We're going to throw a few more out there just for fun. So Venus square to Neptune can also be about inspired, imaginative, artistic transmission states, right? When you need to let let the muse in and open up to inspiration. Let's say that people are feeling the need or urge to do that, but either need some help opening while staying grounded. There's a tricky one. Or they are tend to be a little bit more constricted and need help opening in general. So what could help a person open if they want to let that Venus Neptune inspired imaginative transmission come through? Or on the other hand, if they want to let it come through, but they don't want to get swept away by it. Maybe
Mm.
burdock is a little bit like that too already, but what do you think?
Yeah. So one plant that came to mind is Damiana. And Damiana, it's an adaptogen, so it helps your body to adapt to whatever's going on, but it's also a gentle aphrodisiac. So it has this sort of warming, slightly erotic, stimulating energy to it. And it's definitely a kind of a dreamy herb, and some people even smoke it. It's been added to smoke blends. Don't try that at home. You want to research all of your herbs before you smoke them. But it has been used in that way. So yeah, Damiana, and it has this really infectious, like really captivating scent to it. It's like it's hard to describe, but it's sort of sweet and spicy and minty all in the same
Mm,
time. So I think if you're wanting to kind of let yourself get kind of carried away into some sort of dreamy Venusian space, that would be a really nice one just to make a tea with. I think that would be helpful.
mm,
And then for the other one, without getting swept away, yeah, I would go back to my more grounding herbs and think about even dandelion. I mean, dandelions are so prolific. They just, they are all over the world, and they're so free with their ability to give their creative expression of the little wishes in their genetic material. So they're very expressive and very expansive, but they're also very, very solid in that deep taproot too.
mhm. Yeah, that's great. That's super helpful. So hopefully for all of you out there listening, you get that, this whole big Venus retrograde cycle, a lot of Venus Neptune in there. Those are just a few of the different archetypal signatures and maybe some plants that could help all of you. So, but there is the retrograde. Now let's actually talk about what retrogrades bring and, herbs that can help with what a retrograde brings, specifically a Venus retrograde. So Venus retrogrades bring reversals. One of the unfortunately difficult things about Venus retrograde is that they can bring loss in relationships, whether it's a sister or a brother. Venus and Gemini, especially with twins, has in the twin connotation of the sign of Gemini, can bring up issues around siblings. Um, Venus and Gemini can be about friendships. Venus and Gemini can be about romantic relationships. And suddenly the retrograde means there's a reversal. The reversal can be painful. We're going to say a few other things, but let's start with the idea of losses, difficulties, hardships, pain in relationships. What kind of herb can help heal the heart, or what kind of herbs can help aid in, a process of loss or grief or learning, even especially in relationships?
Yeah, so one herb that comes to mind is goldenrod. And this is not it's not a classic heart remedy or like a cardiotonic. It works on the kidneys, and it's ruled by Libra, so it has this sort of balancing energy to it, and it's very specific for relationships, especially if a relationship has been very dominating or you've been very dominating in a relationship. So it tends to sort of balance out the scales, and kind of help you come back to kind of a more even keel in relationships. If it's really more like a true loss, like losing a loved one, then I would go to something like mimosa, which is more of a cardiotonic, and it's called the happiness tree, and it's just a wonderful medicine for lifting the spirits, coming back into your heart, and finding cheerfulness again after a deep loss.
Right. That's a nice one. And something else that happens during Venus retrogrades, because again, a retrograde brings a reversal. And sometimes that reversal, yeah, again, there's going to be, sometimes there's pain and loss involved. But also, Venus retrograde is in Gemini, which is a Mercury ruled sign. And sometimes that can mean breakdowns of communication in relationships, with Neptune also involved, which we already mentioned. Sometimes that means that things like gossip and deceit or deception and illusion, especially in communication with people that you're close with, can be a real theme. So I know that one might be a little bit trickier, but let me see if I can summarize it. What kind of herbs could we use if we're dealing with people gossiping around us, maybe sort of giving us the metaphorical evil eye, or just that potential for things to be happening around us that we might need protection from, especially maybe people who are yeah, just being petty or something like that, which unfortunately is one of the significations that can come up when Venus is retrograde in Gemini, a very communicative sign with the kind of veiled qualities of Neptune around.
Yeah. So when you said evil eye, what popped into my head instantly was rue, and rue is one of my personal plant allies. Actually, in this picture behind me, that's a drawing, a botanical drawing of rue, and rue is an herb that is used in the Mediterranean. And my family, part of my ancestry is Sicilian, and in Sicily, rue is grown outside of many of the homes to protect against jealousy and evil eye and gossip. And in Sicily, the evil eye is jealousy. It's looking at like, you have something that I want, and that's considered to be a curse. It can curse that household. So they would grow rue outside of the house to protect it from those types of thoughts and energies. So I think that would just be such a nice one. It's also biochemically, it's a vermifuge, which means that it gets rid of insects. So you could take it as an anti-parasitic internally. So it's almost like, if you think about, there's energetic parasites, but then there's actual literal parasites. And this herb works for both. It works for both of those. And I have a little amulet necklace that I like to keep plants in. And so this is one, this is a new one I recently got. And I just have a little sprig in here. So this would be a nice way to have a protector plant on your body, would be to wear it. And rue is a really nice one to wear if you can't have access. Rue can be kind of harder to find. So another one is holy basil. That's another one that's really sacred to India, and in Ayurvedic use is another one that's considered to be a very protective plant.
And you'll see that sometimes referred to as Tulsi. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, same plant.
Yeah. So of course that's a very sacred plant in the Bhakti tradition that we participate in as well. Um, okay, that's really helpful. Yeah. So finally, let's just talk about some Venus and Gemini things that can come up that are a little bit more fun and lighthearted. So Venus retrograde in Gemini, or Venus in Gemini in general, can refer to the need to be more playful, the need to include more exploration, joy, and flexibility, and can also refer to this kind of relationship between clutter, mental clutter, versus, say, mental exploration and multiplicity. So let's give an example. Mental exploration and multiplicity would be like, your environment's nice and clean, but something about your life is maybe too controlled and you need to let spontaneity in. That can be a Venus in Gemini retrograde kind of thing. On the other hand, it could be, hey, look, you're all over the place, and this retrograde is about tidying up clutter. So maybe you could speak to both ends of that spectrum, which are both like, how to have fun and bring in spontaneity if you're too controlled, versus, how to bring a little bit more order and tidiness if you tend to be all over the place.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because I think there's actually one plant that would do both. That would, as I like to say, feed two birds with one hand.
Nice.
So nettles, it's such a simple herb, but it does this. This is what it does. Matthew Wood, one of my teachers, uh, he talks about nettles as being like the old woman in the house with a broom who's like sweeping out the house and then sort of swatting you on the butt, being like, get moving, get moving, get moving, to just sort of help motivate you and get your life force awakened again. So it does this literal piece where it detoxifies the body. It helps open all the pathways of elimination. So you can experience sort of an internal decluttering by drinking nettles. And because it is full of calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, iron, and a ton of other phytonutrients, you're going to also be getting more energy. And so as you're letting go of old stuff and getting rid of internal clutter, and then you start to get all of this chlorophyll and all of these vitamins and minerals, you'll have a boost of energy as well, and probably feel more motivated to look around the external environment and say, okay, does this match how I'm feeling inside? And so it can be a very motivating herb to help you get really pure, clear energy to do the things that you have to do.
Nice. Well, we have nettles is like, I would say you've had me drink more nettle infusions. Is that what I call them?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I mean, I've drank more nettles infusions in, than I ever like. And if at a certain point in my life, if you'd have been like, wait, drink nettles, you've got to be crazy. But just so that people understand who are maybe brand new, because they think of nettles as something that stings. Could you explain a little bit about like how nettles are transformed into a really helping plant, both physically and also how we can think of that stinging aspect as something more constructive? Because I'll admit, when you were first like, you got to drink nettles, I was like, you got to be crazy. Like, I was like, what? That's crazy. Of course, I've become a little bit more, hopefully I've become more enlightened, but yeah, maybe you could walk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good response. I mean, that's like a very smart response. Is like, this stings and it hurts. Why would I bother it or touch it or anything? But it's been a medicine and a food for thousands of years, and even a textile product. Most of the ropes were made out of hemp, or not hemp, made out of nettle cord. So it has a long history of use with humans. And what the thing about nettles is that once it dries, or once it's cooked with heat, it loses the sting. So the sting goes away. So, when you're drinking stinging nettles, there should be no sting. Really, it should just taste like a rich green. It should be like you're drinking grass and sunshine. Like that's really what I experience it tasting like. So to make it, you would just take the dried herb. That's what I would recommend for beginners, is just purchase organic dried nettles. Add about maybe 3/4 of a cup to a quart-sized mason jar. Pour hot water over it, and so you've got a quart of water with about a cup of nettles, and you let that steep overnight, about 8 hours. Then you'll strain out the nettles until you just have the liquid, and then you'll drink that throughout the day. And so you're getting a lot of hydration, a lot of water, but you're also getting all of those medicinal qualities too.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I would say that that is the best possible description, is that I mean, it sounds kind of gross, but it's like, it's not just grass. It feels like you're taking in like bright green grass, earth, and sunshine together.
Yeah, that's a good point. There is definitely that earth element. I mean, it's dense, because there's so many minerals. It almost has this sort of oceanic salty taste to it too.
Yeah, it's really good, I've got to say, and it feels very nurturing, and interesting that it has this motivating factor as well that could be helpful in dealing with this dichotomy with Venus and Gemini, which is going to for some people vacillate between needing to open up, be a little bit more spontaneous, flexible, open to possibilities. That's Mercury. On the other hand, for people who have an abundance of, let's say, mercurial energy in their chart, they may need to bring that in. Remember, for people who are, who have maybe not heard some of my previous talks, Mercury and Jupiter were opposites in ancient astrology. So Mercury is the god of highways, merchants, thieves, the interconnectedness, multiplicity, and constant change of life out in the moving world. That's Mercury's domain, and he's street smart. But that world is held together by a larger order, and that order is Zeus, Jupiter. So that order is the legal system, it's government, it's religion, it's morality. It's all of the larger idealisms that hold, or ideologies that hold things together. So they complement one another. Just like the law, Zeus needs to have someone who's an expert in all of the loopholes and line items of the law, but you also need someone who upholds its spirit, who upholds justice, truth, beauty as ideals. So the balance between Zeus and Mercury is always there. And some of the mythology around Mercury that tells the story is really interesting. So anyway, the point is that during this Venus retrograde period, we're dealing with the goddess Venus, who has so much to do with pleasure, cleanliness, hygiene, beauty, pleasing and pleasant things. And then you're tossing that into a mix with Mercury. And so tendency is for people to go in one of those two directions, either from overwhelmed by spontaneous energy and then through the retrograde to needing to build some greater container to hold it within. Or you also have the potential for people who have that container but need more flexibility and movement within it. And that'll be, so you'll often see those two kinds of responses. Anything that you want to add before we close?
No, I think that was really fun. I mean, it's amazing how the plants, I was a little nervous, but they always, they never fail. They always come in as needed. So I hope it was helpful for everyone to hear a little bit about these different plant medicines, and maybe there's one that, really resonated, and you can try on and try out.
Yeah, I apologize for putting you on the spot, but I wanted, as I said at the beginning, I wanted to put my wife like right in the hot seat specifically so that people could see how amazing you are, how amazing she is, and just being able to have those herbs come really quickly. Like the first thing that kind of I was personally taken by with my wife was just she's encyclopedic and super knowledgeable, and just really fluid in how her her mind works with, especially with the plants, which I think is awesome. So yeah, and I feel like it's a good match because, as you guys can hear, there's such an, like, both of us have this way of talking about astrology and herbs, and really at the dawn of both herbal practices in the West and astrological practices in the West. In fact, not just in the West, but in the East, where Ayurveda and astrology were married together. These are sister sciences that are really meant to go together. So we hope to do more of this. A few things that I want to, make you aware of. One is, again, my wife's website, which is skyhouseherbs.com. Do I have that right?
That's right. Yeah.
I'm
And
still
it's
trying to remember it.
brand new. So it just launched, and we're still working out some glitches. So please sign up for my newsletter if you want to hear more about the plants. I'm going to be putting YouTube videos together about different topics on herbal medicine. So you can find me there. And then I think the website should be pretty much finalized probably by the end of next week.
Yeah. And so people who don't know, like, my wife and I owned a yoga studio together for about the past decade. We just closed it last year because my wife decided that, in addition to being a yoga teacher, a teacher of yoga teachers, and a manager of a yoga studio, that she wanted to be committed to her herbal practice full time. So we have a new website that's launching that's just specifically for her herbal practice, and her YouTube channel has just started. And it's been one of the intentions behind closing our studio was that we deliberately wanted to spend more time bringing our craft together. So these videos have been slow in coming out because of COVID-19 and not having childcare. Um, but gradually we'll be doing more of them. And by the end of the year, you should have more semi-regular updates where we do work together on planets and plants, because when you can have some plant help to get through these transits, it's really, really handy. And also we want to make sure that people who study in my program with astrology, or Ashley's program with herbs, also realize that you can put the two together. And sometimes for some people, studying plants and planets at the same time is really going to be where it's at. So we also have a kind of a joint co-running apprenticeship program that'll start in January of 2021 that we'll be talking more about as the year goes on. So please stay tuned for lots of more cool info. And yeah, thanks again for hanging out with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, well, take care, everyone. We'll see you again soon. Bye.